For 14 years, Dave Dalby was the definition of a Raider, tough, dependable, and fearless in the trenches. As the anchor of the offensive line, he went to battle every Sunday, paving the way for legends like Ken Stabler and Marcus Allen. He was a three-time Super Bowl champion, a warrior who never missed a game, and a beloved figure in the Raiders locker room. But while Dalby thrived in the chaos of football, life after the game told a much darker story. When the stadium lights dimmed and the roar of the crowd faded, he faced battles no one could see. Then in 2002, the Raiders family was hit with devastating news. Dalby was gone. A tragic car accident took his life far too soon. But was it really just an accident, or was something much deeper going on behind the scenes? This is the untold story of Dave Dalby's rise, his struggles, and the heartbreaking end that left the Raiders community searching for answers. The rise of a Raider, Dave Dalby's early years, a young star in the making. From the moment Dave Dalby first stepped onto a football field, it was clear he was built for the trenches. Born with a natural toughness and a relentless work ethic, he dominated as a high school lineman in California. His raw strength, intelligence, and ability to read defenses made him stand out from his peers. College programs quickly took notice, and Dalby found himself at UCLA, where he refined his craft and proved he was more than just another offensive lineman. He was a future pro. Catching the eye of the Raiders, the Oakland Raiders, a team that prided itself on toughness and grit, had been watching Dalby closely. But there was one problem. Jim Otto, the legendary center, had been the heart and soul of the Raiders for over a decade. Replacing him seemed unthinkable. However, the team knew that Otto's time was coming to an end, and they needed someone capable of stepping into his massive shoes. In the 1972 NFL Draft, the Raiders took a gamble on Dalby, selecting him in the 4th round. He was not the flashiest pick, but he embodied everything the Raiders stood for: hard-nosed, dependable, and built to dominate in the trenches. The pressure of replacing a legend. When Otto finally retired in 1974, the Raiders had a choice to make. Could Dalby handle the responsibility of taking over for a future Hall of Famer? The expectations were sky high, and the pressure was immense. If he failed, the Raiders' offense would suffer, but Dalby never flinched. Instead, he embraced the challenge head-on. He stepped in and immediately proved he was the right man for the job. His mental toughness and unwavering consistency made the transition seamless. By his 2nd year as the starter, he was already establishing himself as one of the most reliable centers in the league, becoming the foundation of the Raiders' offense. Through the 1970s and 1980s, Dalby became the anchor of the offensive line, leading the way for legendary quarterbacks like Ken Stabler and opening lanes for superstar running backs like Mark Van Egan and Marcus Allen. His durability was unmatched. He never missed a single game in 14 seasons. Dalby was not just another player, he was a true Raider. But as the years went on, and his football days came to an end, life after the game would prove to be a far greater challenge than anything he had ever faced on the field. The heart of the Raiders dynasty, Dave Dalby was never the loudest player on the field. He did not demand attention, and he did not chase the spotlight. But for 14 seasons, he was the silent force at the center of the Raiders' legendary offensive line, the heart of a dynasty that dominated the NFL. A worthy successor, taking over for Jim Otto, the greatest center in Raiders history, was no easy task. Otto was a warrior, a legend who played through injuries and defined the Raiders' tough identity. Replacing him was like stepping into the shoes of a giant. But Dalby never backed down from a challenge. He worked tirelessly, earning the respect of both coaches and teammates. By the time the 1970s Raiders hit their prime, Dalby was no longer just a replacement. He was the foundation of the offensive line. Chemistry with Ken Stabler. As the Raiders' offensive general, Dalby's job was more than just snapping the ball. He had to protect Ken Stabler, one of the greatest quarterbacks in Raiders history. And Stabler trusted him completely. Their connection was seamless. Dalby read defenses, called adjustments, and ensured the Raiders' offense stayed one step ahead. In the heat of battle, when the game was on the line, Dalby was the one holding everything together. Super Bowl glory. The 1970s and 80s Raiders were built for greatness, and Dalby played a crucial role in 3 Super Bowl championships. His ability to dominate in the trenches gave the Raiders an edge over their fiercest rivals. Whether it was opening lanes for running backs or keeping defenders off Stabler, Dalby's consistency made him one of the most underrated pieces of the Raiders' success. The silent leader. Dalby never needed to yell or give fiery speeches. His teammates respected him because of how he carried himself. A warrior who showed up every Sunday, no matter how battered and bruised he was. In the brutal era of the 1970s and 80s football, when playing through pain was a badge of honor, Dalby was the kind of player who earned respect without saying a word. He was more than just a center. He was the heartbeat of a legendary Raiders dynasty. The challenges behind the toughness. Football is a game game of pain, and few embodied that more than Dave Dalby. He played in an era when toughness was not just expected, it was demanded. No excuses, no complaints, no mercy. For 14 seasons, he battled in the trenches, absorbing relentless punishment to protect his teammates. But what was the cost? The hidden toll of an Ironman career. Dalby never missed a game in his entire career. 205 consecutive games, including playoffs. That kind of durability did not come without consequences. Offensive linemen absorbed hit after hit, their bodies acting as human shields. Every snap meant another collision, another moment of violent impact. Dalby's job was to take the punishment so others could make the highlight plays. In today's game, teams monitor players closely, watching for concussions, injuries, and long-term damage. But in Dalby's time, injuries were ignored, and painkillers were handed out like candy. Players were expected to shake off concussions, wrap up broken fingers, and play through torn ligaments. Dalby was no exception. Football shaped him, but it also left its scars. For Dalby, football was everything. It gave him structure, purpose, and identity. He thrived in the violent, hard-nosed world of the Raiders, where toughness was the standard. But when the game ends, what happens to the warriors who only know how to fight? Many of his former teammates spoke about the unseen struggles of retired players, chronic pain, memory loss, and the emotional void left after football. The game he loved also left behind wounds, both physical and mental. Was the toughness too much? The old-school mentality of playing through pain came at a cost. Years of relentless contact led to long-term damage, injuries that never fully healed, concussions that went untreated, and a body that had taken far too many hits. Dalby was a warrior, but even warriors can only fight for so long. Did the brutal nature of football play a role in his tragic end? One thing is certain, the same toughness that made him a Raiders icon may have also contributed to the battles he faced after the game was over. The struggles after football, a man without a game. For 14 seasons, Dave Dalby knew exactly who he was, a Raider, a warrior, a protector in the trenches. Every Sunday, he lined up against the best, ready for battle. But when his NFL career ended, the world he had always known disappeared. The abrupt end. Was he ready? Retirement is an inevitable reality for every player, but few are truly prepared for it. For Dalby, the transition was sudden and unforgiving. He had spent nearly a decade and a half anchoring the Raiders' offensive line, surrounded by teammates, structure, and purpose. Then one day it was all gone. No more practices, no more film sessions, no more roaring crowds. For some players, the transition is seamless. They move into coaching, broadcasting, or business. But for Dalby, the NFL was not just a job, it was his identity. Without it, he struggled to find his place in the world. A life without purpose? Many former players face an unsettling reality when they leave the game. Football had been their entire existence. The routine, the competition, the camaraderie, it all disappears overnight. And with it comes an overwhelming sense of emptiness. Dalby had been a quiet leader, never one to seek attention. But behind the scenes, was he fighting his own battles? The toughest battle of all. Football had given him everything: fame, financial stability, and brotherhood. But it had also taken its toll. The years of punishment on the field left lasting scars, both physically and mentally. Was he dealing with chronic pain? Did he struggle with the long-term effects of concussions? Some players turned to coaching to stay connected to the game, but Dalby largely stayed out of the spotlight. Without football, did he feel lost? Was the toughest opponent he ever faced life after the game? One thing is certain: the transition from NFL star to everyday life is not easy. And for Dalby, the struggles after football may have been the hardest battle of all. The tragic end, a life cut short. On August 30th, 2002, the Raiders family received shocking news. Dave Dalby was gone. The man who had been a pillar of strength for 14 seasons, who had battled through every obstacle on the field, had met a tragic and unexpected end: the fatal car accident. That night, Dalby was driving his 1993 Saturn sedan down a highway in San Bernardino County, California. For reasons unknown, his car veered off the road, crashed into a tree, and overturned. The impact was fatal. He was only 51 years old. The reports labeled it an accident. No alcohol, no drugs, just an unexplainable, devastating crash. But was there more to the story? Speculations? Was it truly an accident? For many, the circumstances of his death raised unsettling questions. Was Dalby struggling with something deeper? Life after football had not been easy for him. Teammates and close friends wondered if the weight of retirement, the physical toll, or even undiagnosed head trauma had contributed to his tragic fate. Some speculated about fatigue, distraction, or even possible medical issues that had gone unnoticed. Others feared that Dalby, like so many ex-NFL players, had been battling silent demons, whether it was depression, isolation, or pain. A devastated Raiders family. When the news broke, shockwaves rippled through the Raiders organization. Former teammates, coaches, and fans struggled to process the loss. This was not just another player. They had lost a brother. Tom Flores, his former coach, spoke about how reliable and dedicated Dalby had been. A man who never sought the spotlight, but always delivered when it mattered. Ken Stabler, Marcus Allen, and other Raiders greats mourned his passing, remembering him as one of the toughest men to ever wear the silver and black. For the Raider Nation, the loss was more than just a tragic accident. It was a reminder of the brutal reality that many former players face. The game they gave everything to often left them struggling in its aftermath. Dave Dalby had survived the trenches of the NFL for 14 years. But in the end, life after football proved to be his toughest opponent. Remembering a fallen Raider, his lasting legacy. When the news of Dave Dalby's tragic passing spread, the outpouring of grief from the Raiders family was immediate. For a man who had spent his entire 14-year career in silver and black, his impact stretched far beyond the football field. The reactions from teammates and coaches. Former teammates were devastated. Ken Stabler, who had taken countless snaps with Dalby, protecting him, called it a heartbreaking loss for the Raider Nation. Tom Flores, Dalby's longtime coach, described him as the ultimate team player, reliable, tough, and always willing to do the dirty work in the trenches. Others who had lined up beside him, Gene Upshaw, Art Shell, and Jim Plunkett, shared their sorrow, remembering Dalby as the quiet enforcer who never sought the spotlight but played a critical role in the team's success. The tributes and honor from the Raiders. The Raiders organization paid their respects to one of their longest tenured warriors. While his name may not have been as celebrated as other Raiders legends, those who understood the game knew his value was immeasurable. During the 2002 season, the Raiders dedicated a moment to honor Dalby's memory, recognizing his contribution to their 3 Super Bowl championships. The loss of a player so deeply ingrained in the team's history was felt by everyone in the franchise. Does Dalby's legacy get the respect it deserves? Despite being an Iron Man at center for 14 seasons, Dalby's name often gets overshadowed by flashier stars. He was not a vocal leader, not a highlight reel player, but he was the foundation of one of the greatest Raiders teams ever assembled. Today, Raiders fans who remember him know the truth. Without Dave Dalby, there is no dynasty. His toughness, reliability, and loyalty to the organization embodied everything the Raiders stood for. In the end, Dalby's legacy is not just in the championships he won, but in the respect of those who played beside him. He may not have been the most famous Raider, but to those who wore the silver and black with him, he was one of the most important. A heartfelt farewell, the legacy of Dave Dalby. Dave Dalby's journey was one of loyalty, resilience, and quiet greatness. He played a critical role in the Raiders dynasty, protecting quarterbacks, opening holes for legendary running backs, and keeping the offensive line as one of the most dominant in football. Yet when the stadium lights dimmed and his career ended, Dalby faced a battle tougher than any he had encountered on the field. Like so many former NFL players, he struggled to find purpose beyond the game, and his tragic passing left behind more questions than answers. Was Dave Dalby one of the most underrated Raiders legends? Despite being a 3-time Super Bowl champion and the backbone of the offensive line, Dalby's name does not always come up in discussions of the greatest Raiders. He was not a flashy superstar, but those who played alongside him understood his importance. He represented everything the Raiders stood for: toughness, loyalty, and an unbreakable will. Perhaps it is time for Raiders Nation to give him the recognition he truly deserves. Does the NFL do enough to help former players adjust to life after football? Dalby's struggles highlight a larger issue within the sport. For many players, football is their entire identity, a structured, purpose-driven life where they are needed, respected, and celebrated. But what happens when it is all gone? For some, the transition is seamless. For others, like Dalby, life after football can be the hardest fight of all. It raises an important question: does the NFL do enough to support its former players? Let us hear from you. Do you think the league should be doing more? Should teams have a greater role in supporting their former stars? Join the conversation and keep the Raiders' legacy alive. Dave Dalby's story is one of great triumph and deep tragedy. It is a reminder that football is not just about stats and trophies. It is about the men behind the face masks, their sacrifices, and their struggles beyond the game. Now we turn to you, Raiders fans. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe Dave Dalby is one of the most underrated Raiders legends? How should the NFL do more to help its former players? And if you want to dive deeper into Raiders history, check out our other videos on legends, forgotten heroes, and untold stories from the silver and black. Subscribe for more Raiders content, and let's keep these stories alive.